Mount Sinai. The people of Israel were finally nearing the Promised Land. They began to settle and make camps for themselves. Eventually, arguments began to break out among the people. No matter how small the disagreement, the people hurried to Moses for help. Moses grew tired of listening to the people day after day. One evening, Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, arrived with his wife and sons to visit Moses. He saw all the troubles Moses was having to deal with and suggested that Moses pick leaders from among the people to handle the everyday problems. "If a really big problem comes up, then they can call on you," Jethro said. Moses liked the idea, so he appointed some helpers. It was a good thing, too, because God would soon call Moses to do some very important work for him. The group set up camp below Mount Sinai. This mountain reached so high in the sky that a cloud hung around the top of it. God called to Moses from that mountain with a message to tell the people of Israel. "Tell my people that I have brought them out of Egypt because I love them," God said. "I have taken care of them. But now it is time for them to obey me. I will tell them some special rules they will have to follow. If they will obey, they will be my most treasured people on earth." Commandments from God. Moses told the people they should be ready for God's call. They followed Moses to the foot of Mount Sinai. He told them to stay there and listen for the sound of a trumpet. Then Moses went up the mountain. There, God gave him the 10 Commandments for the people to follow. Because God made the earth and the people on it, God knew what would really make them happy. 1. I am your God, and you must not worship other gods. 2. Don't make up any idols or images to worship or serve. 3. Never take God's name in vain. 4. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 5. We must obey and respect our father and our mother. 6. We must not kill one another. 7. We must not commit adultery. 8. We must not steal from one another. 9. We must not tell lies about each other. 10. We must not want something that belongs to someone else. God gave Moses 2 stone tablets that had his commandments carved in them. Moses kept these as reminders of God's laws for his people. The 10 Commandments were God's most important instructions to the people. There were many rules to help guide the Israelites in their daily lives. God called Moses to Mount Sinai again to hear the covenant made many hundreds of years ago with Abraham. God had done all the things he told Moses he would do. Now he wanted to make a covenant with the people of Israel. Moses stayed on the mountain for 40 days and nights, copying down what God told him. He read to the people all the commandments God wished them to keep. "If you will keep these laws," Moses told them, "God has promised that you will be a special people." The people said that they would obey God, so Moses built a big altar and sacrificed some of the animals. Then he took the blood and sprinkled it on the people to remind them of their covenant with God. A tent for worship. During the long years that Moses and his people had been on the road, they had stopped occasionally to build an altar to give special thanks to God. But they had no building or set place in which to worship. God told Moses that it was time for the Israelites to build a tent to serve as a place of worship. They would call it a tabernacle. It would be easy to take apart and put back together so they could take it with them on their journey. God described exactly how the tent was to be built and what would go inside it. Many materials were needed to create the tent. When the people found out what Moses wanted them to build, they gladly donated the wood and cloth and precious metals that the Egyptians had given them. The inside would have beautiful curtains. Behind one set of curtains would be a special chest of gold and wood called the mercy seat. Aaron was to be the leader of the worship services. He and his sons would have special clothes to show they were priests. They would make offerings on the altar to show the people's love and obedience for the Lord. The golden calf. Moses had patiently written down everything God had told him. Now it was time for him to take the 2 stone tablets and return to camp. He believed the people would be eager to hear about all the wonderful things God had told him. Moses had been gone a long time, though. The people had become very restless. One day they had complained to Aaron about having to stay in one place for so long. "We have not seen Moses for weeks," they said. "Make us a god who can finish leading us on this journey." Aaron told them to bring their wives and daughters golden earrings to him. He melted them down and molded a golden calf. Then he built an altar in front of it. The next morning the people brought offerings to their new god. They brought out food and drink, and Aaron proclaimed it a feast to the Lord. God could see and hear everything that was happening. He became very angry and told Moses he would destroy the people for breaking his commandment. Moses begged him to forgive the people of Israel. Then he went down the mountain to find out what was going on. When Moses saw the people drunk and dancing before the golden statue, he threw down the 2 tablets God had given him, and they broke into pieces. He ordered them to grind up the idol, and he made them swallow the dust. A new covenant. Moses went back to beg God to forgive the Israelites for worshiping the golden calf. "Those who have sinned will be punished," God said. Moses offered to take all the sins of the people on himself. God saw that Moses was very sincere about helping his people. Moses went back to camp and set up the tabernacle. The people watched him go inside. They saw the cloud from the top of Mount Sinai come down and lie in front of the tabernacle tent. The people were much afraid because they knew that God was present in the cloud. Moses said to God, "How can we go on with this journey if you will not go with us? No one will believe we are your special people." "I will go with you as you ask," God said to him. "You have been a faithful servant." So Moses carved out 2 new tablets of stone and took them back to Mount Sinai. There, God replaced the 2 tablets he had broken. Moses stayed with God on the mountain for 40 days and nights. When he came down again, Moses' face was shining with light. He and all the people of Israel were very thankful that God had given them another chance. The Lord's Tabernacle. The Israelites were ready to do whatever God asked of them. Moses told them to prepare to work 6 days a week on the tabernacle. No one would work on the 7th day, which was the Holy Sabbath. Moses asked for offerings to go into the tabernacle. People brought gold and silver jewelry and precious stones. Skilled carpenters began to carve the tables and altars. They hung beautiful blue, purple, and red draperies as God had said. This time, Moses knew the tabernacle would at last be completed. The great cloud the people had seen many times on their journey came again to their camp. It hung over the tabernacle and glowed so brightly the people could not go inside. The next morning the cloud lifted from the tabernacle and began to move. This was a sign to the people that the Lord was with them, and they were to continue on their journey together. When the cloud stopped again, the people stopped too. They put up the tabernacle and went inside to worship. The people complain and rebel. Over 600,000 people had begun the journey from Egypt with Moses. Some of them seemed to be unhappy or dissatisfied all the time. The unhappy people did a lot of complaining. It made God very angry when the people complained. He had done many wonderful things for them, but they quickly forgot them. Not long after they left Mount Sinai, the people began to complain because they were tired of eating the manna that God provided every day. "I will send the people meat for a whole month," God told Moses. "They will have so much of it, it will make them sick." The next day a flock of quail flew into the camp. There were so many, the people stayed up for 2 days gathering them to eat. The people who had complained the most ate too much of the meat. They got sick and died. It was a hard lesson for everyone. Moses led his people to the borders of Canaan, the promised land. As God had instructed him, he sent a group of men from the camp as spies to go into Canaan and see what the land and the people were like. After nearly 6 weeks, the spies returned. They brought with them all kinds of beautiful fruits. "It is a lovely land indeed," they said. "The people seem very happy there. They are big and strong. If we try to take the land, they will kill us." Caleb and Joshua were 2 of the spies who had gone with the others. "Yes, the people are mighty," they said, "but we have nothing to fear. God promised us this country. He will take care of us." But the people saw the other spies shaking their heads in disagreement. "We have come all this way from Egypt just so the Canaanites can kill us," they said to Moses. They complained louder and louder. God didn't like their complaints and threatened again to destroy the Israelites. But after Moses begged for mercy, God spared all but the 10 spies who had given a bad report. Shortly after they returned to the desert, a man named Korah got some of his friends and some of the Israelite leaders to rebel against Moses. When Moses heard what they were up to, he told them to come to the tabernacle the next day with a cup for burning incense. A great crowd gathered around Korah and his men. Moses and Aaron stood to one side and Korah on the other. "God will now show you who should be your leaders," Moses said to the people. "If these men live, then I am not the one. But if the earth opens to take them, you will know that God has chosen Aaron and me." Just then, the ground underneath Korah opened up and swallowed him and all his men. The Israelites began to think that what had happened to Korah was Moses' fault. A group of them headed for the tabernacle. As they came nearer, the cloud of the Lord appeared over the tent. Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before the cloud. Moses prayed that God would forgive his people. Then God told Moses to get a rod from each one of the 12 tribal leaders and lay them before the tabernacle. Moses obeyed, and the next day Aaron's rod had sprouted leaves and fruit. That was God's message to the people that Aaron was his chosen leader of the tabernacle. Moses' failure and last speech. After many days in the desert, the people again ran out of water. As they always did, they went to Moses for help. "You have brought us out of Egypt to this evil place," they cried. "Now we will die because there is no water." God told Moses to take his rod and go to a nearby rock. "Speak to the rock so they can all hear you," he said. "Water will come out of the rock so everyone can get a drink." Moses went up to the rock, but instead of speaking to it, he took his rod and hit it twice. "Listen, you rebels," he shouted. "Must I always get your water for you?" Water poured from the rock as God said it would. God spoke to Moses and Aaron. "I asked you to speak to the rock, but you hid it. If you cannot obey me in front of my people, you will not lead them to the promised land." Then God told Moses to take Aaron and his son Eleazar to the top of Mount Hor. There Aaron died, and his son took his place as priest. All the people were sad at Aaron's death and mourned him for 30 days. After defeating the people of Midian, Moses described to the people how they were to divide the land of Canaan among the tribes. They were also to establish 6 special cities called cities of refuge and cities of safety. A person who killed another accidentally could go to a city of safety. There, they would be protected from anyone seeking revenge for the killing. Murderers would not be allowed inside a city of safety because they would have broken one of God's 10 commandments. It was time for the people to cross over the Jordan River into the Promised Land. Because Moses had disobeyed God by hitting at the rock with his stick, he would not be making the last part of the journey with his people. Moses gathered the people of Israel together one last time. He repeated the 10 commandments to them. Moses also reminded the people of all God had done for them over this long journey. Then God spoke to Moses. "Although you will never go into the land, you will see it before you die," God said. "Climb to the top of Mount Pisgah, and there you will see the promised land before you die." Moses did as God had told him. He told the people to welcome Joshua as their new leader. Then he went up on the mountain where he died. The people of Israel cried and mourned for Moses for 30 days after he died. He was the greatest leader in Israel's history.